Hey guys, welcome back. The dust has sufficiently settled, which means it's time for me to talk about Halo Infinite's campaign in full spoiler detail. This is like my kind of third review. I just want to talk about everything that I loved about this game and also the few things that I didn't quite like as much, in as much spoiler detail as possible. There's so much stuff that I've had to hold back and reserve and not talk about in my previous two reviews, and I'm so excited to dive into all of that stuff in this video. Today's sponsor is Audible, but you'll find out more about that later on. And also, massive thank you to 100 Thieves, as you can see right there, for sending me over there some of their iconic Halo merch. You know, if you guys are ever looking for a Halo content creator to pick up, you know who to talk to. But yeah, let's get into it. Let's start off, as per usual, with the good stuff. And boy, there is a lot of good stuff. So much so that I've had to split the good section down into two bits. The first bit is story. We need to talk about the story before we talk about any of the campaign gameplay or anything, right? Because this story was fantastic. Firstly, I just want to say that this is the story that Halo needed after Halo 5, and 343 deserve a round of applause for just nailing it so much in the wake of such a bad story. The fact that they've managed to course correct the game's narrative and the franchise's narrative in such a good way, whilst not retconning anything and not... They definitely skip over a few things, but the creative story arc is definitely still relevant. That is just a fantastic achievement, and honestly, I didn't really think it could be done, and I'm happy to have been proven wrong. Opening up, Infinite's intro cutscene was just fantastic. It really set the stage well for the game. It was, I mean, as it stood, an epic cutscene, right? Seeing Chief fight Atriox was honestly surreal. It set up the mystery of whether Atriox was dead or not really well. Although I will say one thing, I think even though it wouldn't have really fit in the timeline, I think it would have been cool to see Chief in his Mark 6 mod in this cutscene from Halo 4 and Halo 5, and have this be how he got his Gen 3, even though I know that doesn't really make sense in the timeline because he was drifting in space for 6 months, but I don't know, I would have liked to have seen the transition from his Mark 6 mod to Gen 3, but it is what it is. This cutscene was fantastic either way. I think the pacing and the flow of the overall story as well was fantastic. There were story beats that were like equally spread out. There were never really any major gaps between major story beats, besides at one point in the middle of the game during Pelican Down and the sequence. You do get little bits of narrative in there, but I really feel like, in fact, this is the best way that I can demonstrate the pacing of the game. It was fantastic at the start, and then you hit those two levels and it kind of just stops. And then you get into the Nexus and it continues. Those two missions kind of halted the pacing a little bit, but those aside, it was fantastic. At no point besides that did I ever really feel the story was going too fast or going too slow or dragging or anything. It really just went at the perfect pace. The music and the art style of this game both complemented the story so well. I'll get more into detail about this in a minute, but they were both just truly excellent. They felt equal parts familiar and also new. Just a very natural continuation, I think, of what Bungie did with the original games. It really felt like, with the art style in particular, like it was just a very natural continuation of, for example, Halo 3's Foreign art style or Halo Reach's UNSC art style, and the music as well felt like a very natural continuation of some of the themes that Marty and Michael created, whilst also throwing loads of new stuff in as well. I mean, the Endless theme, oh my god, lit hairs standing up on my arm every time I listen to that without fail. Absolutely fantastic. And then of course you got Finale with the Halo 2 music that, I'll be honest, when I first heard that, I had no idea that song was in the track at all. I teared up quite heavily because Halo 2 is my favorite game of all time, and that theme is just it's so much a part of Halo 2. It's such a big deal for someone who's a massive fan of Halo 2, and hearing that again for the first time since 2004 was surreal, and the timing of it and everything was just so perfect. Perfection. I really liked how the three major allied characters in this game underwent major, satisfying story arcs with very notable beginning, middle, and end points. So, for example, Chief obviously starts out being defeated, and then as he goes through, he acknowledges his regret for allowing all of this to happen by not preventing the created uprising, by not stopping the Didact, or not trying to talk Cortana down. But then at the end, when they conquer it, he feels like he's really overcome that regret. The pilot ends up finding his confidence again and regains his will to survive, and the weapon learns to live with who she is, and she emerges from Cortana's shadow to truly become her own entity with Chief and to help him serve in a way that Cortana used to, but also while being her own entity and not just being a copy of Cortana. She really emerges from that shadow and becomes her own character. And I think the most important thing here is that all three of those story arcs really resonate with the undertone of hope that 343 were going for with this game. You start out at the game, everyone is depressed, everyone is lost, or for the most part everyone is depressed. The weapon gets a bit depressed halfway through the game, but everyone is depressed, everyone has lost hope, but as you go throughout the game, you work bit by bit to restore that hope, and by the end, it's restored, and it's a fantastic journey you go through with a really satisfying conclusion. And speaking of satisfying conclusions, I loved the ending to this game so much. It was resolute enough to feel satisfying, but at the same time it was left open enough for interpretation, for theorization, and also for continuation, as we might be seeing with Halo the Endless. I really do think that Infinite, like Halo 2, earned its cliffhanger because it tied up enough of its plot threads throughout the story to deserve ending in a more open fashion, compared to, say, Halo 5, where I didn't really feel like many of its plot threads that it set up were really tied up. It kind of just ended without anything getting resolved. And I think the most important thing about the ending for me is that it felt like the perfect ending for Cortana's story. I thought that about Halo 4, and I still think that about Halo 4, but Halo 5, at least for me, just completely undid Halo 4's ending and really nullified it, which kind of makes me sad because I love Halo 4's story. It really undid that, but Infinite feels like it's kind of redone Cortana's ending in a fantastic fashion, and I do hope that they leave that plot here. Don't bring Cortana back again. Her final goodbye to Chief was absolutely perfect. As a character, she was partially redeemed for what she'd done with the Created, but at the same time, she accepted that she was too far gone with what she'd done to the universe and all the damage and pain that she'd caused, so she went out trying to help the thing that she held the dearest, Chief. It made perfect sense narratively for me, and I really do think that it was the best way to resolve what Halo 5 set up without completely invalidating it, but also without focusing on it for the entire game. It fit perfectly for me. And in terms of the final level itself, to me, it felt like such a great combination of Halo 2's kind of narrative notes with Halo 3's grandiose set piece. I mean, again, I'll get onto this more in a minute, but when you walk in to the actual auditorium, that room, I literally just got, I shit you not, I just got chills thinking about it. The art style of that room, how grand and imposing it feels with all of those statues of the Foreigners and everything in there. It's this incredible set piece for the final boss battle that is very nicely intertwined with the subtle undertones of Cortana saying goodbye to Chief and knowing that she's doing what she's doing to ensure that he and the weapon can continue to help humanity and save the universe. It's such a good combination of both of those narratives. Halo 2 and Halo 4's narrative notes, actually, both of those games, mixed with Halo 3's really big set pieces. I thought it was fantastic. I think something else that this story does really well is it manages to retain that feeling of mystery that I always had from Halo 1, 2, and 3, while also explaining some things and not leaving the player completely in the dark. For example, the whole thing with the Created was explained, and the Banished and why the Banished don't like humanity, that was very much tied up, but at the same time we've got the Endless that are this completely new thing. We don't know who they are, we don't really know their motives or anything, but at the same time I feel like enough was given to us to the point where it didn't feel completely just unresolved and like kind of sequel bait in a way. But that said, I'm very much looking forward to finding out more about them. And the Harbinger plays into this as well. I think her character, I really liked it. I do have one complaint about it, but we'll get to that in a minute. Her character creates this great air of mystery that really does continue throughout the game. She really keeps you guessing about her origins and her motives the entire way through, and although they aren't specifically answered by the end, again, I feel like enough was given to allow us to at least theorize about that, which to me satisfies me. I know that that isn't going to be the case for everyone. I know that a lot of people do like hard, resolute endings for this kind of thing, but me personally, I like things being left open to interpretation and then answered later, and for me, with that belief, it satisfied me. One thing that I loved about the emotional side of the story was its re-emphasis on Halo 4's kind of who is the machine plotline. I noticed that a lot in this game with the weapon and Chief, and also kind of with the pilot as well. The pilot intertwines with that a lot, and it made me really happy to see that back, because I loved that kind of philosophical idea from Halo 4's story, the fact that arguably the AI is more human than the human soldier, right? And I really felt that again in this game, and again, as a massive fan of Halo 4's story, it's fantastic to see those notes make a return, and not only just make a return, but be executed so damn well. And that continues as well for the other connections to Halo 4's story in this game. One of the things I loved in particular was how guilt-ridden Chief still was for not stopping the Didact from destroying Cortana's chip in Halo 4. There's a bit at the end of Pelican Down where he kind of subtly references this, and you can really tell that he is still impacted by that moment. That moment hit him profoundly, and it's not something that he's going to forget soon. And on that note, I absolutely loved the weapon. I didn't really have any major concerns about her going in, but there was always this little thought where I was like, are they just going to do like Cortana again and have her just be a carbon copy of Cortana? But they really didn't. The combination of fantastic writing, of just incredible delivery and acting and performance from Jen Taylor made her feel familiar to Cortana, but also stand out as a like entirely own character. And it worked so well to not only just give Chief a new AI, but also to play off Cortana and the memories that she was leaving, because that created even more of like a delta between the two characters and made you realize how different the weapon really was, despite her technically in canon being a semi-copy of Cortana. And something that they did in this game that is, I think, if my memory's not failing me, the first time Halo's ever done this was create a moment of strife between Chief and his AI. There's that bit in the Nexus and the Command Spire where the weapon deactivates the deletion protocol and Chief gets really angry, and there's that entire bit where they're kind of just like, they're mad with each other. She's in his head, but they're mad with each other. And then the pilot chimes in as well, and he's like, Chief, you were going to delete her? But like, we know that it made sense why he was going to do it. And that moment of strife between the two arguably main allied characters, created a really unique moment of storytelling that we hadn't had before, but I really enjoyed it. Okay, moving over to the other side now, to the Banished side, I absolutely adored the Banished cutscenes and the Banished story arc in this game. The story arc that faction undergoes in this game was fantastic. But because it was so good, I just found myself at the end wanting more cutscenes. I feel like we maybe didn't get as many Banished cutscenes as we should have done, but what we got, I absolutely adored. Halo Wars 2 did such a fantastic job at setting the Banished up to be this grey area faction, and Halo Infinite, it makes me so happy to say, really went into that. I mean, Doizak's destruction, man. That cutscene where Atriox watches Cortana do it, you could see the emotion in Atriox, and it suddenly gave the Banished motive for hating humanity, right? We know from past media like Divine Wind and Shadows of Reach that they can accept humans into their ranks, but the reason they hate humanity in this game is because their home planet was destroyed as a byproduct of humanity's technology. Humanity are the reason that Doizak was destroyed. Yeah, these cutscenes in general just really felt to me like a Halo 2 style peek behind the curtain at the enemy faction. I just wish we'd had more, because what we had was so fantastic. And speaking of the Banished, you know I gotta mention it. Jaeger Adomni in every way. I loved all the Banished bosses and the characters, but Jaeger was just like, they were all this good. Jaeger was like up there, like literally, I loved him so much in every way. The voice acting was incredible. The filter on his voice was fantastic. The animation was incredible. Just everything about him. His boss fight, the kind of horror theme of his boss fight was just perfect. That character was everything that I'd wanted him to be and more. I just hope that we get more of him. He's dead. I've seen some people saying that he might not be dead because when you kill him, his body disappears. Maybe that's the second coming of Noble Six Cave theories. I don't know, but I wouldn't be against that. I wouldn't be against him surviving, and maybe, I don't know, because of his battle with Chief, he becomes even more cybernetic. I just want more Jaeger because I loved that character so damn much. Everything that I'd expected about that character, which is just, they just beat my expectations. So happy. And finally, in terms of narrative positives, Pete motherfucking Stacker. They brought Keys back and had Pete Stacker voicing him doing new lines again. That made me tear up. When I first saw that, this cutscene here, I think it was on the Nexus, when he's like, you made an AI of yourself, Catherine. Yourself. I was like, that's actually Pete Stacker. It's not just like, they've not just done what Call of Duty does, where they recast like Captain Price and the other dude from Black Ops. It's like, no. This is the Pete Stacker playing the Captain Jacob Keyes again. And seeing him again was so good. And kind of on that note as well, I really loved all the references and tie-ins to previous games, and at the same time, it never felt fanservice-y. Like, that could have very, very easily, like all the quotes from Halo 3, from Halo 2, from Halo 1, from Halo 4, could have felt really fanservice-y, but at no point did those tie-ins and references ever feel like 343 were just shouting at us like, hey guys, remember Halo 3? Hey guys, remember Halo 4's ending? Remember Halo 2? It never felt like that. It always felt really natural and organic, and it was just a great additive to the already excellent story. Okay then, so moving away from the story and over to the world design and gameplay and that kind of thing, god damn the art style in this game. Good lord. I mean, all the art styles, the Banish art style, the UNSC art style, the natural world is fantastic, but the absolute standout highlight was the foreigner aesthetic in this game. Good god, it felt like a true natural continuation of Halo 3 with elements of 1, 2, 3, and 4 mixed in there. I could literally sit here for like 4 hours right now and talk about every single thing that I loved about it, but I'm gonna highlight just one bit because it's the one thing that, like, I mean, I got chills at quite a lot of things, right? But holy shit, when I first saw this, I got genuine chills. The silent auditorium, the rooms towards the end when you're getting close towards what I think was the actual auditorium inside, where you've got these massive statues of what I'm assuming are like foreigner judges that stand over you in a really imposing manner. Oh my, that mixed with like the gold and the bronze and the notes of purple as well. Absolutely, genuinely incredible, not just from like a visual standpoint, but also from like an atmospheric standpoint. It really helped to build that feeling of just feeling insignificant when you're walking into this massive arena to be judged by foreigners about whether or not your species are going to be exiled forever and locked into silencers to be detained on a ring forevermore or be killed or whatever, you know, like it built into the atmosphere and the narrative of the environment so well. Just bravo, everyone that was involved with that. My god, you did a fantastic, beyond fantastic job. In terms of level design, I think that the AA gun level, Pelican Down, was a little bit repetitive. However, the fact that it was on its own rather unique island in terms of terrain and layout and everything helped it from getting boring in terms of a gameplay perspective. Like, that island is really fun to explore, and it helped to alleviate a lot of the repetitiveness of the task that you were doing. Something rather interesting is that at no point during the game did I ever really think about the lack of biomes. It's one of those things where I feel like the game definitely would have benefited from a snow level and like a desert level and a jungle level, and I really want DLC to do that, don't get me wrong. Snow levels are my absolute favourite thing in video games, full stop, let alone Halo, right? But at the same time, I think that the kind of sub-biomes within that Pacific Northwest biome were varied enough to the point where I never felt like the game was harmed by the lack of biomes. I just felt like it could have been better. Does that even make any sense? I don't know. I just didn't think it was that big of a deal, to be honest with you. I thought it was going to be a lot worse than it was. The dialogue between the NPCs in this game with the Marines and the Jackals and the Grunts in particular is so damn good. I love the way that they actually seem to kind of talk to each other. The Jackal dialogue is so good. I love the differences between the Jackals being the males and the Skirmishers being the females. If you don't know, Jackals are basically live in a matriarchal society, so females rule the males. So there's like a few cool little instances where a Skirmisher will talk about wanting to be a ship mistress one day. It just feeds into that lore really well, and also just creates loads of funny moments. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen the super viral videos of all the hilarious grunt clips and everything, but all the grunt dialogue in this game and the Jackal dialogue and the Marine dialogue is all fantastic. The grunts reference Psycho Mantis from MGS1. I almost forgot to mention that.
I've got it. Use the controller port. Plug your controller into controller port 2. If you do that, he won't be able to read your mind.
The grunts reference Psycho Mantis. You guys, I mean, I'm a big MGS fan, if you couldn't tell, so that to me is a big deal. Very big deal. Love that. Something else that I'd love to see make a return were the enemy sentinels in this game. My god. I was watching some Halo 4 and Halo 5 Promethean gameplay the other day, and then I went and played Halo Infinite and fought some sentinels shortly after. And good lord, the difference. Sentinels are just so much more fun to fight. I love the different Sentinel kind of subtypes in this game as well. If you guys know, I'm a big Sentinel fan, so seeing the Halo 2 Sentinel Captain come back, as well as like the little like electric suicide bomb Sentinels as well, was great. And on that same note as well, the Adjutant Resolution boss fights in the kind of semi-enforcer style big aggressor sentinel mech was so cool. That took me by a complete surprise, and fighting him in that mech was so fun. Something that I loved in the actual levels, the more linear levels, was how certain areas seemed themed around certain games. Like there's certain corridors and hallways that reminded me of the Mantle's approach from Halo 4, for example. And then there's the Nexus and the Command Spire with the gondola, and of course, the big Sentinel pipe that reminded me of the Sentinel Wall, like Sacred Icon and Quarantine Zone in Halo 2. I was so happy. I wish I recorded my reaction to seeing that pipe, because man, I was cheesing and then some. I loved that so much. There's so many little callbacks in not just the story and the narrative, but also in the world design that, again, don't feel fanservice-y, don't feel forced, they feel natural and organic, which just makes them even better. The entire House of Reckoning level, the layout of everything, the idea of the level itself was just fantastic. I love seeing the Banished try and reconstruct UNSC camps within that tower. It had this really imposing feel to it. The music and Escherum's dialogue and the entire encounter design of that section was so good. The Razorback is one of, if not the single, no, it is the single best vehicle addition since the Falcon to Halo's Vehicle Sandbox, which is funny because I think the Infinite's Vehicle Sandbox overall isn't very good, but the Razorback is a standout exception to that rule. Loading it up with Marines full of like arcane sentinel beams or rocket launchers or just really OP weapons is so damn fun. Who needs the Rocket Hog when you can have 5 Marines with upgraded rocket launchers in your Warthog? I mean, come on, that thing is so fun. And the final positive thing that I want to talk about in this video is such a small detail, but I can tell that so much thought and effort was put into it, and I really appreciate that. It's the little, like, the HUD upgrades when you upgrade your Mjolnir, or when the weapon does something inside your armor, or when you do, like, for example, the deletion protocol. The way that it all displays on the screen, not as, like, a really ugly, like, immersion-breaking HUD element, but rather as, like, an actual piece of the Mjolnir's BIOS feels so natural and seamless, and it really feels like you are looking through the Master Chief's eyes inside that Mjolnir when you see it, as opposed to looking at a screen playing a game. Again, it's a small detail, but it's one of those things that I can really tell a lot of thought and effort was put into that, and bravo to anyone who decided to do that because it was a great addition. So I think that's the perfect segue into today's sponsor, Audible, who are going to help you learn all about Zeta Halo's deep, storied and rather disturbing history. Believe it or not, there's another season going on right now besides Halo season, the holiday season, aka time to treat yourself and stay away from whatever the hell eggnog is. Seriously, what is eggnog? We don't have it in the UK. What the hell is that stuff? Anyway, what better time is there to treat yourself to vast swaths of Halo lore, particularly lore that pertains to Zeta Halo, than now? I mean, come on. The entire Forerunner trilogy detailing Zeta Halo's disturbing past, along with Point of Light that goes into more of its recent history, both of which are very important, are both on Audible ready to be listened to, along with Shadows of Reach, which is the kind of pseudo prequel to Halo Infinite, and many, many more Halo audiobooks. Try Audible for 30 days on us and listen while gaming, whilst working, whilst chilling out, and also whilst working out to prepare for the large amounts of turkey that you're no doubt going to be eating soon. And yes, turkey is a god tier meat, and I will not hear any turkey slander. None. Just head to audible.com/HiddenXperia or text HiddenXperia to 500 and make the most of the 60% discount they've got going right now for your first 3 months of Audible. That's just $5.95 a month. Once again, that's audible.com/HiddenXperia or text HiddenXperia to 500. Okay then, so let's move over to the more negative stuff now. Now, there's nowhere near as much as the positive stuff, but I will say this game wasn't perfect. There are a few things that really grind my gears, the first one in particular. So let's start off. The biggest issue that I have with this game, quite honestly, is the fact that, once again, there is no reward for finishing it on Legendary whatsoever. You get the achievement, but there's no armor, or you don't even get a coating or like a weapon charm or anything. There is zero reward whatsoever, which to me just feels like the monetization is stepping in and taking something away from us again, because it's like, why would you give the players something for free when instead you could take that thing and just put it in the shop behind a $20 price tag? It really sucks to see the monetization kind of creeping into the campaign as well, and I really hope that at some point they do add a reward for finishing the game on Legendary, because that was a massive issue with Halo 5, and I can't believe it's an issue again, but it is. Narratively, I do have a few issues as well. I really liked the Harbinger's character, but I felt like she was killed off too early. Again, I thought her boss fight was absolutely fantastic. I loved everything about it, but I kind of wish it didn't happen, because I really liked her character and I wanted to see more of her. It really felt like she was killed off too early. That said though, I can see what they were doing with her. I think she was meant to be more so a plot device to kind of usher in the Endless that are going to be the next big thing in story DLC or whatever. Which I get, I understand that, and I think it worked. I just would have liked to have seen more of her, because she was pretty interesting. I think she was just a cool character, and I wanted to see more of her. Same with Jaeger as well, but you never know. Maybe he's in a cave with Noble Sith, for God's sake. Like I said earlier, I do really wish that we'd seen more Banished stuff. I think this game does rely a little bit too much on kind of hologram radio calls. Like, most of the time when you're talking to Escherum, it's through what is really a glorified radio call. I mean, the hologram is cool, seeing him there talking and all that, but it conveys his dialogue in the exact same way as a radio call does, right? There's no like extra depth added there. And in fact, when Ackman finished the game of the day, me and him got in a call for like an hour or so and we were talking about this, and he made this really good point where it's like in Halo 2, Tartarus, for example, and the enemy as well, the Covenant in general, they actually do stuff. Like, they have their own plot lines and their own goals to achieve, and they intertwine with like Miranda and Johnson and with Chief and the Arbiter and Artax and stuff like that. Whereas in Halo Infinite, Escharum kind of just waits for you. He doesn't really do anything until you fight him and then you kill him, which I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity. And again, like my issue with the Harbinger, I do understand narratively why he does that. I get the idea of that in the story, and it does make sense, right? But I just wish that he'd done more before we killed him. And the same kind of goes for the rest of the Banished as well, in particular Hyperius and Tavares, the Banished Killer brothers. I mean, we never saw them in a cutscene at all, which is weird considering one of the biggest things about Hyperius is that he's got Locke's helmet and chestplate on his bicep, right? I wish we could have seen that in-game. Of course, you can kind of go and look at his body once you've killed him, but it's not the same. I wish there'd been a cutscene that introduced those two, or at least gave them a little bit of backstory. I also wish that we'd actually seen Lasky in the game as well. I do get the idea of putting all the Infinity characters in the audio logs only, because they kind of want to move on from like the Halo 4 and Halo 5 era of Halo, but I love Lasky. I'm a big Lasky stan. I would have loved to have seen Lasky take up like a Captain Keyes kind of role in the game and be like your commander in the field, but I'm happy he's alive at least. I'm really happy they didn't kill him off. I didn't think they would do, but I'm happy that he's still alive, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that in some DLC we get Lasky. I want to see him again. I love Lasky so much, and having him like kind of absent from the main story was a little bit of a letdown. I do think, more so from a gameplay perspective, not a narrative perspective, but definitely a gameplay perspective, this game suffers from one faction-itis a little bit. Having the Banished be the only enemies, as fun as they are to fight, was a little bit of a letdown, I'd say. I really enjoyed the Skimmers. I thought they were really fun to fight, but I don't think that they were enough to act as an entire new faction. I really wish we had seen Flood in the game. I wish they'd been the secret next faction, but they weren't, and to be honest, at the end of the day though, I would have rather have just had the Banished and the Skimmers than have them add the Prometheans again and have them be as unfun to fight as they were in Halo 5 again. They weren't great in Halo 4, but I just found them just awful in Halo 5. So at the very least, I'm happy they didn't do that, because that would have sucked if the other faction sucked as well. I'd rather just have one great faction as opposed to one faction that was decent and one faction that was just not fun. So yeah, it is what it is. I mean, hopefully the Endless become that second faction at some point, so I'm excited to fight them. Fingers crossed in Halo the Endless. Two things that I was really disappointed not to see. The first one was a Scarab. I mean, bro, how do you do the Banish and not do a Scarab? Come on, imagine how sick dynamic Scarab encounters would have been in the open world. Like, all of a sudden, you just see a Scarab climbing over a cliffside in the distance. Would have looked so imposing. Obviously, that would have been really hard to do from like a game design perspective, but I don't know, I would have loved to have seen it. I do have a little bit of like a tinfoil hat theory though. You know the excavation site mission where the beam comes on and you have to go and turn off the excavation turret? Scarabs are excavation tools. First and foremost, they're meant for excavating foreigner sites and foreigner artifacts. I'm convinced that at some point in development, that turret or whatever must have been a Scarab. There's no way they do that and don't have a Scarab at some point, surely. I bet the genesis of that idea must have been like, right, we're going to have a Banished Scarab here, but then it turned out it was too hard to make or whatever, so they didn't do it. Like, I get that, but I would have loved to have seen one, because the Banished Scarab is my favourite Scarab design. It was so cool in Halo Wars 2, and I really wanted to see it in a first-person shooter game, but fingers crossed for DLC, I guess. And the second thing is ODSTs. They were mentioned so many times in the game and also in the audio logs, but they were never in the game. I was really hoping that like when you hit level 50 with the FOBs, you could call in Helljumpers to come and support you, but they were never in the game. Neither was Chip Stubbo either. Spoilers real quick for Halo Memory Agent, that audio log series that came out the other day. If you've not listened to that yet and you don't want it spoiled, click off now. You've clicked off, okay, cool. He's in that. Chip Stubbo is in that, but he wasn't in Infinite, which is kind of weird, but the fact that they've got his voice actor to do that kind of tells me that he's around still and he wants to do Halo stuff, so fingers crossed again we can get him in a DLC. In terms of gameplay, it really sucks that Marines can't drive vehicles in this game, and I do think the Marines felt a bit too static. I did like finding Marine encounters in the open world and stuff, but I don't know, I feel like some levels should have spawned you with marines at the start. Like, I feel like it would have been cool if the Silent Auditorium, when you charge the Silent Auditorium, you've got marines at the start with you, or when you go into, say, the Nexus, you've got a bunch of marines with you at the start. It did suck not starting levels with marines, because all the linear levels felt... I love games that make you feel isolated, but sometimes you do need those, like, NPC allies with you, and I feel like some of those would have benefited from having marines with you. And on that note as well, as far as I can tell, I've not 100% of the game yet in the release version of the game, but in the pre-release version of the game that we had, I did all the FOBs, all the HVTs, rescued all the marines and everything, and the world didn't really seem to change at all. Like, I was hoping that, I don't know, this is a bit of like a over-the-top thing, right? But I was hoping that once you rescued all the FOBs and rescued all the marine squads, Lasky would appear or something, or you'd at least get, like, Lasky would come in over the comms and say, Chief, is that you? Oh, you restored it, or, like, something, you know, something like that. A little, like, Easter egg ending for doing all the side stuff, but as far as I could tell, there was nothing for doing that, which kind of sucks. Well, actually, I say that. I take it back. Your reward was getting the Rocket Hog, and the Rocket Hog in this game is so bad, like, what's the point? Give us Lasky, please. In terms of the open world, I loved it, but the one thing that I was really hoping to see was dynamic weather, and we didn't get it. One of my friends, Rythes, who's a fantastic artist, made this insanely cool art of the day, but he did some paintovers of the open world to show what dynamic weather could look like. And I mean, look at these pictures. Tell me these don't look absolutely incredible. I don't know how easy these, or difficult rather, these would be to implement from a game design perspective, but at some point in the future, I would love to see this be implemented, because, like, dude, sniping in thick rain with lightning in the nighttime, look how cool this looks, man. Oh, I'd love to see this in the game. I mentioned this in, I think, both of my other reviews, but the fact that you can't actually pick up the skulls and hold them and beat enemies down with them, despite the fact that oddballs in the game is just strange to me. I seriously hope that's being patched in. I was also going to mention the lack of a mission list, but 343 are patching that in as well, so I'm not going to mention that in the negatives. And then the two final things, again, things that I've already mentioned. Swapping equipment and grenades on controller is an awful experience. It's so unintuitive and just not enjoyable at all. Keyboard and mouse, I imagine it's fine because of custom bindings and everything, but swapping between them in the heat of battle is just not good at all. I don't know how they could change this, but it's just not great. And finally, I gotta just bring this up because I get why it's not there, but at the same time, it does still suck. The lack of co-op is really hurting. Honestly, it hurts even more because of how much I love this game, because I can't stop thinking about how cool it's going to be going around the open world with friends. It just sucks that we have to wait until, like, what, May I think it is to get that. One thing I really hope they do with multiplayer, or co-op rather, is that player one, the host or whatever, plays as the Master Chief, but then all the other players play as their multiplayer Spartan 4s. I think that would be a really cool way to mix up just playing as Chief clones. I'd love to see that in the future. But yeah, that's, I think, pretty much it for my overall spoiler review of Halo Infinite's campaign. This has been a long video. I've got a lot that I want to talk about, as I'm sure you can see, so I won't waste any time in running the video out here. Don't forget to leave all your thoughts down below in the comments, your thoughts on my review, your thoughts on the game, your thoughts on certain things that I brought up. Let me hear it down below in the comments, and yeah, I want to give a massive thank you to Jordan Dakin-mimi for becoming a new iconic one over on Patreon. Thank you very much, sir. That is very iconic of you indeed. And of course, to everyone else who continues to support me over there, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it as well. And I'll catch you all in the next one.